Sometimes you just want to take in more of a moment. There's a setting or a conversation or an event that you wish could just carry on forever, and it's safe to say that your readers are going to share those feelings too. You see, we don't want our writing to feel one note. We want to work with speed to complement our writing rather than fight against it. Look, there's a time and a place, so let's discuss pace. Let's see how you can apply variations to enhance your own creative writing and sentence craft. There's chapters on the videos if you want to go to anything specific, and feel free to save this video to your watch later list and revisit it when you need it. So firstly, what is it and what does it affect? Fundamentally, pace is the speed at which a story unfolds. It contributes to the rhythm of a story and often works alongside genre conventions. For example, many physical fights are going to sport a faster pace, whereas solemn moments like, say, a funeral scene, they may benefit from a slower pacing. These are expectations that we can either lean into and meet, or subvert. Let's talk about 3 big things that are going to affect your pace: action, dialogue, and description. Now there's layers on how we can improve each of these. We could go into a lot more detail, and I will in the future if you want me to, but at the moment, let's just look at some disadvantages of poor pacing in each of these categories, and then some quick ways that we might be able to resolve these issues. Firstly, description. If there's too much description, especially if you're info dumping through exposition, your audience may skip prose, meaning jumping or skimming through the paragraphs until something happens. When this is an issue, it tends to be because there is no feeling of narrative progression. And if there's no feeling of progression filling your audience, the audience is instead going to be left filled with boredom. So how do we resolve this? We consider what's important in a scene, or which details might be relevant, or have already been previously highlighted. And we'll have a look at this a little bit later in an example piece. Again, remember, if you're drawing attention to something in the description, in the details, you're highlighting its importance. Don't go describing the fireplace in really great detail if you're never going to light a fire in it or discover some burned up notes. For more information on that, then check this card up here somewhere on Chekhov's gun. Inner monologues. They're a great way to tell the feelings of a character in that moment. They can, however, get overused and quite drawn out. And then this is how it becomes a disadvantage. I think we've all read at least one book where it's in first person or perhaps third person limited, where we've just skipped over the protagonist's thoughts. I know I have. Best way to combat this, again, is consider whether the moment dictates such a lengthy monologue. And this is often dictated by your action. For example, if your character is going to get hit by the swing of a sword, do they really have time to fill in half a page of thoughts? Not likely, because this lengthens the scene and it can disrupt your reader's pace and immersion. However, inner monologues aren't terrible. A benefit of inner monologues is that you can tell instead of showing. Again, people are going to disagree with this, but there's a time and a place, and I'm not saying to swap all showing for telling, and vice versa, don't swap all telling for showing. Nor am I saying that telling is a dirty word. I believe there's a place and a purpose for both showing and telling. Otherwise, why do we have both? They've got to serve a purpose. Showing offers dramatic interest, whereas telling often excels at clearly presenting facts. And it's great to strike a balance in your writing. Inner monologues allow for presenting facts. They allow for telling. Character description. It can feel weak and inconsistent, and it can lead to confusion if you've approached it with the wrong pace. See, pacing can actually add and emphasize your characters. If your character is erratic and high energy, consider a faster pacing and a more dynamic style of movement and detail. However, if your character is cunning and calculated and calm, perhaps opt for a slower pace when we follow this guy. On to action, right? Consider how much time you realistically have in a given situation. A bit like I mentioned with the inner monologue, if your character is ducking under a sword swing, do they have time to readjust their armour, to unsheath a dagger, to pop open a bottle of poison, to taint the metal and then twist behind your enemy and stab them in the back? Not likely. So try to ground your action in your audience's expectations. See, it's likely that this character would just duck under the sword swing and then do all of that other stuff after, once they've gained a bit of distance, a bit of safety, and they've got more time to do so. And that aids grounding that scene in reality, unless they've got like super speed. Then that way you're subverting that expectation and emphasizing the character trait. So you've got to figure out when you want to cram detail and if it's effective for your scene. Also, cramming action always makes me think of that really long runway scene in Fast and Furious where they're chasing that plane for like 15 minutes. I mean, how long was that runway? Aren't they like 2 miles long? That plane was rolling for at least 10 times that distance. Look, what I'm getting at is that your action's duration, its pace, should often reflect the events that are unfolding in order to aid that immersion and not pull people away from it. Again, not always, there's always exceptions, but Fast and Furious ain't one of them. We can make a scene progress faster by providing movement to our characters. This can be beneficial for character introductions, effective for adding a bit of life to conversations, or for transitioning between scenes. And on the other hand, we can slow a conversation down by becoming static. We can create intense interrogation scenes where we trap our audience in the moment by keeping our characters in that room unchanged. I've got a video on active description that you can watch by clicking up here or here. I really need to learn where these cards go, but somewhere up here. Over-directing is something I personally struggle with. In my revisions, I notice just how much I tend to over-direct in that first draft. It's being too specific with who does what, which hand goes on something, which gets carried where and what, and just too specific. Removing some of this over-direction not only speeds up the pace, but it also offers some freedom to our readers, and it lets them use their creative imaginations. So put a little trust in your readers, put a little trust that they'll understand things and that they can fill in some of those blank details that you've left for them. Let them have a bit of fun. Over-explain an example. I had a scene recently which my mentor character, he unlocked a door, he took a key out of his pocket, unlocked the door, stepped in, turned the light on, then my protagonist entered after him, he sat down, and then the mentor character turned around, put his hand on the handle, closed the door, twisted the doorknob, put the key in, locked the door, put the key in his pocket. Too much, way too much. It was completely unnecessary. It drew away from the conversation because this door is not important. It's not important that he's locking it. It slowed the scene down unnecessarily. Upon revision and feedback, my mental character then just opened the door, he turned the lights on, and my protagonist took a seat once he was inside. Now the audience will fill in the blanks how they see fit. Again, it wasn't important that he locked the door. I don't know why I included it in the first revision, but hey, that's over-directing. Okay, onto dialogue. So dialogue can be slowed down by using harder to read dialects, or sped up by using more simple lexicons. Think George versus Lenny of A Mice and Men. George had more vocabulary to him, and because of Lenny's personality and his character type, he had a more restrictive lexicon to him. And so doing this might even add to your characters and their personalities. Consider also shortening the length of the sentences to make them feel more abrupt, or having single words of dialogue to increase the authority and certainty, like opt for no instead of I don't think so. It reduces some of that clutter and it also adds authority to your character. You can also reduce the amount of dialogue tags that you're using by ensuring that you're clear about who is speaking. And again, this comes down to reinforcing characters, making sure that they're truly unique individuals. And furthermore to that, dialect can actually work to your advantage here. You see, a character with a Scottish accent is going to be clearly distinguishable from, say, an American accent. So we can use that to our advantage to make some of those dialogue tags, the he said, she exclaimed, they announced, completely redundant and therefore removable. There's also something else we can do to dictate a scene's pace. Look at our sentence craft. We can vary sentence lengths to not only offer a bit of variety, but also to change the actual rate that our readers progress through the narrative, progress through the scene. Breaking down larger sentences into smaller ones through removing connectors and introducing some of those full stops and commas allows us to change our readers' rate of progression by forcing moments of respite. And again, vice versa, we can speed up the scene by reducing the breaks and adopting more compound sentences and connectives. For example, John sprinted down the alleyway, his heart pounding loudly in his ears, feet slamming against the pavement, the shouts of the mob behind him growing louder. John sprinted down the alleyway, his heart pounded, his feet slammed against the pavement, the shouts of the mob behind him grew louder. Which one of these felt faster to you and which felt slower? Let me know in the comments. Word redundancy. I mentioned it a few times, but here we're going to be looking at repetitions that we don't need, any dialogue tags that are overly used or overly flamboyant, or are completely redundant because we know who's speaking and who's thinking. Also, any unnatural inclusions of names in conversations because we don't reinforce someone's name at the end of every single sentence, do we, creatives? Okay, let's apply some of these to an example scene. This one's going to be a couple meeting at a bus stop after not seeing each other for some time. Lily could see James standing alone at the bus stop as she entered the street. Nobody else could be seen waiting nearby. Cigarette butts, which must have been recently lit and discarded, smouldered in the snow on the ground next to where he stood. It was cold. Lily ran over to him as soon as she spotted him. I can't wait to kiss him, she thought. She leaned in and their lips touched. A flood of warmth spread through her cheeks and her heart beat hard in her chest. Tobacco-stained fingers held onto her own throughout the embrace. Okay, if you ignore my accent slips, it's an alright scene. Writing styles are subjective, so maybe this works for you, but for me, I want it to be a bit faster paced. So let's look at some redundancies and refinements. So James is alone. We don't need to say that nobody else could be seen around him because he's alone. I also feel that entering the street is a bit of an unnecessary detail here, so I'm just going to remove that. We also don't need the tobacco-stained fingers because we've got the cigarette butts still smoking away. As they're still smoking, I feel it's also unnecessary to state that they were recently lit. Our audience will hopefully draw that fact from them smouldering. Again, we've already established that there's snow and, well, gravity exists, so it's likely everyone will presume that it's on the ground, so we don't need that. And now we've got snow, we don't need to reinforce that it's cold. We've shown it, we don't need to tell it to. Now we've sped up the scene a bit, it feels more natural for Lily to just sprint over to him, as there's a feeling of less time passage from when we entered to when she runs. So that fast pace is now going to translate as her own excitement. And we've got another redundancy here, where she spots him a second time, we don't need that. We can turn this into a longer sentence too, which will speed up the moment, and it will remove that inner dialogue as well, which basically spoils what's about to happen. I'm going to shorten this heartbeat and inner chest bit because where else is your heart supposed to beat? And I'm going to change this visual detail in the end into a sensory one because we've got a bit of warmth in there, we've got a bit of vision, and now we can add taste. I'm grounded in realism here, so if they're kissing, I'm not expecting her to be looking at his fingers anyway. It's more realistic that she'll taste the cigarette on his lips, which also paints a more vivid and true to life picture in the reader's mind. So, what have we got now? Lily saw James standing alone at the bus stop. Cigarette butt smouldered in the snow next to him. Lily ran over and their lips touched. A flood of warmth spread through her cheeks and her heart beat hard, and she could taste the tobacco on his smiling lips. And we could probably refine that even further. I noticed an ant that I don't want in there at this point, but we'll stop there because you get the point. But you see how much faster that scene plays out? Improving pacing means cutting unnecessary words and action. If it doesn't serve the purpose of establishing facts, establishing characters, or it doesn't progress the narrative in at least one way, all it's doing is negatively affecting and impacting your pace. So, did you find anything here that's going to improve your own pacing? Are you going to slow the pace down in those reflective static moments? And do you plan to use more limited but active descriptions in your faster paced scenes? Let me know. I would love to see how you plan to rework some of your own sentences, so please pop them in the comments below, or tell me your plans for your scenes. If you've enjoyed watching this video, please watch this one next where I discuss how I slashed my drafting time almost in half. And with that, I will see you next week with another video. Take care.